I don't even know.
So,
Do you want to go forward with this?
Yeah,
Should we abort already?
I think it's okay.
Let's all just hang up and go home.
Welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave. It is I, Patrick the Tall, again. Today, we shall proceed with the linear reread. We've gone to the episode 34, where we will treat Tyrion 15, Dany 2, Dany 3, and Arya 1, and Clash of Kings and the Storm of Swords. I am not alone today. I am joined today by Alix.
Hi, I'm Alix. Aiwendil on the forums.
I'm also joined by Casey.
I'm Casey. I go by Blue Eyed Queen on the forums.
We have Paul.
Hey, this is Paul, SerDinnerRoll on the forums.
And we have Zach.
Hi, this is Zach. I go by Alias on the forums. Happy to be here.
And we have Nymeria.
Hi everyone, it's Nymeria on the forums and Mary in real life.
Isn't it Marie?
Well, yeah, in French you would say Marie, but I'm pronouncing it the English way, like Mary.
Yeah, I know. My name is really pronounced Patrick, not Patrick.
Yeah.
So,
so you know how it works.
Yeah.
We come down to our level.
Yeah, we have to dumb it down.
To stoop down.
So, okay. So,
Tanja, did you forgot
Miss
Tanja?
somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, you missed.
Anyway, hi, I'm also here. I'm Scilens on the board. I'm Tanja. Way around. There we go.
So, the first one is, of course, Tyrion 15. The chapter starts at the same time as Bran 7, but because it goes on for a couple of days/weeks, we have chosen to do this after Bran. So, 1st of October, 299, after Aegon's conquest. Paul, this is yours, right?
Yep. All right. So the chapter begins with Tyrion dreaming of the aftermath of the battle. He dreams about the fire and the corpses and the maggots in the corpses. He falls in and out of sleep because he's having a fever dream and he's wounded, before he finally eventually realizes he's in bed. When he is able to wake up for the first time, he feels that his face has been bandaged, and he sees Podrick. And Podrick quickly runs off, and Tyrion becomes afraid that he can't talk and that he has no mouth. And Podrick goes and fetches Maester Balabar, who I think has one of the best names in the universe, who puts Tyrion back to sleep. As Tyrion falls asleep again, he actually has a rather pleasant dream of him and Tysha's happy days in the little cottage where they were married, and specifically remembers how she said how she likes his face. He wakes up again, and Maester Balabar is there and attempts to put him back to sleep, but Tyrion refuses by grabbing the chain and choking the Maester until he says he won't give him Milk of the Poppy. He then tells the Maester to take his bandages off, and the Maester does so after a threat of more choking. The wound underneath appears clean. Balabar explains to Tyrion that his wounds were just completely filthy when they found him in the cellar, and that he had a broken rib and an arrow wound at the shoulder joint that had mortified. He had almost lost his shoulder, but they were able to treat it with boiling wine and maggots. Tyrion informs the Maester to bring a looking glass so he can actually see his face, but when he sees it, he's mortified because the cut starts just below his left eye and took 3/4 of his nose and part of his lip. He then asks where he is, and Balabar tells him he's in Maegor's holdfast, just above the Queen's ballroom, apparently because Cersei wanted him watched over. Tyrion secretly believes that she actually wanted him to succumb to his wounds, and he says he wants to return to his own chambers, but then he learns that Tywin has taken over his chambers, as well as the position of Hand of the King. He then tells Balabar to bring Podrick. Tyrion tells Podrick to send away Balabar and have Franken come give him some dream wine instead. He tells the lad to bring Bronn too, who Podrick tells him has actually just been knighted. He then, as Podrick leaves, Tyrion then wonders if Tysha would like his face now.
All right. Very well. Very good. Do you have any questions for it? We've tried to do a little different where we try to get everyone to think of things they can ask specifically, like more like homework for once. Very interested to hear what people have to ask or talk about.
I don't have a lot of questions about this chapter. I think it's pretty straightforward, but it's really heartbreaking. It's really an emotional chapter because he's waking up after the battle. He thought he was like this victorious leader because he led the troops out in the battle, but he ends up alone in a bedroom with half his face cut off, and his job is gone, and his sister's watching over him and drugging him. It's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah, and we also get his dream of an actual look at how his and Tysha's relationship was.
Yeah.
And apparently it was actually pretty good. And then he's forced back into the reality where everything sucks, and it isn't just him and the woman he loves in a cottage.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Alix. I feel like this is easily as much of a coup as Ned's fall. I mean, Tyrion spends this whole book, A Clash of Kings, consolidating power in King's Landing, and it's clear that he really loves it, and he's really into it, and it's like it feels like he was made for this. And then all of a sudden it's all ripped away, and he didn't even do anything wrong. He won the battle. It was just that he was wounded, in an assassination attempt, honestly, and it's all taken away. And maybe Tywin was always going to do that, but it just sucks.
Yeah, it sucks that he was out for like 5 days while everything was changing.
He might have been able to do something.
If he was awake, maybe, or at least get a seat at the table and try to
defend himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because I think all of this time he's out of it. Cersei is basically telling Tywin how terrible Tyrion was as a hand and stuff like that, and so he's basically done by the time he wakes up. Right? There's nothing he can say for himself.
Yeah, and the things he did for the battle all ended up working out, like the chain and the wildfire, and that was all really smart planning. And no one gives him credit for that eventually because he's not here to defend himself.
And I think it's really kind of the beginning for Tyrion's bitterness and fall, really, because he doesn't have power anymore, and there's going to be obviously the purple wedding and the trial and everything, but this right there where he is basically abandoned by everyone except maybe Pod is where it all starts to go down for him.
Yeah, and up until that point he was really trying to do the right thing and help people and save the city, and after that's all taken away from him, I think he kind of goes into a darker mode of thinking where he's well, since nobody cares about my efforts to help them, I'm just gonna think about myself first and try to look out for myself.
If we were to chart Tyrion's progress on an arc, it's pretty clear that his zenith is past, I think, both in terms of his power and influence, though maybe we'll see that come back up later. But you guys are right that his moral character seems to have deteriorated only since.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts were pretty much the same, that this is the start of the ending of, or start of his fall, I guess. We had his whole arc in Clash of Kings, and there's a whole 15 POV chapters about him in Clash of Kings, which, if you look at in comparison to, say, Dany, there's only, 5? You just see, he's really, he was at the top of the game at the beginning of the book, and then now he's at the end, and it's gonna keep on getting worse and worse for him, and it sets up a lot of things for the next book for him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's basically always thinking about Tysha, even before that. But we have the first real powerful flashback to what it was, and I think it's starting to prepare for the whole the trial and the murder of Tywin. His whole way of thinking in dance.
Does he think of Shay in this chapter?
Yeah, he thinks of her too, I think.
But not as much as Tysha.
Well, so he
definitely.
has the ideal vision of himself where he, is hailed as a conqueror, he's knighted, and he has Shay by his side, calling him the Giant of Lannister, and that's the ideal, perfect dream he has of himself that obviously is torn away.
Mm-hmm. And about the dreams, I mean, I feel like we're saying that every time there's this kind of description, but the description at the beginning of the chapter is as always, really vivid and powerful and horrific about all the dead people and maggots and corpses. And I mean, George is really, every time it gets really, really powerful.
Yeah, this honestly might be one of my favorite dreams in the series. It doesn't get a lot of talk, obviously. There's no prophecies or really anything to take away from that first one. But it's just so gorgeous. My favorite part of it is how it transitions from just all the confusion and chaos at the start to just this like quiet, empty darkness that he's walking through, and he's just looking around and seeing all these horrifying images. And then he realizes that his mouth is sewn shut. You know, that's just like the perfect horror image of just being silenced and not being able to have any control anymore.
Yeah, and the whole black and white, and it's really, it's really powerful.
Also, the fact that he feels like he has no mouth anymore, and he's feeling like trapped in those bandages. It's really a metaphor of how he's been silenced by his family during this whole ordeal.
So do we think that Cersei really wanted him to just die, probably?
I feel that she's always been alright with him just dying.
Yeah. Do you guys think she was the one who sent what's-his-face to kill him? Mandon Moore.
Someone, yeah. Well, we kind of talked a little bit about that in the chapter where it actually happens, but I'm not really sure it's Cersei, because the only evidence we have for it is the fact that Tyrion really, really believes it, but I'm not sure.
But who else would it be?
Well,
I believe it's Littlefinger.
Kind of, me too, but mostly because I've read the Reddit thread, and it's a good argument on that. But yeah, I'm not sure Cersei would have acted this way right now. And in A Clash of Kings, we see how Tyrion is actually pretty good for gauging who's Cersei's pawn and who isn't. And he's really sure that Sir Mandon Moore isn't. I mean, he doesn't really think anything of him. And so why Sir Mandon Moore when there are others that are definitely Cersei's creatures?
Right. And other evidence in the future, obviously, is we get Cersei's POV eventually, and she never thinks about this.
Yeah, exactly.
At any point. The reason for Littlefinger basically is that, so we learn later that Mandon Moore came from the Vale with Littlefinger and Jon Arryn. So there would obviously be some sense of a relationship there. And then there's a few cases throughout where it's clear that Littlefinger would have motive for wanting to kill Tyrion, particularly the point about Tyrion threatening to reveal who really killed Jon Arryn. So he doesn't actually think it's Littlefinger, but Littlefinger probably took it that way and wants to get him out of the way. And there's just evidence throughout the whole series of Tyrion, or of Littlefinger trying to frame Tyrion for things. You know, he puts the Dragonbone Valyrian steel dagger on him. He just does all these things constantly to undermine Tyrion. You know, later he'll eventually make him the patsy for Joffrey's death. So he's just constantly using Tyrion to bring him down.
Makes sense. Yeah, you said that you felt that this was a clear indicator that he was out and done for, at least in King's Landing, and I'm not sure that I read it the same way. I mean, yes, he took a wound, but would that mean that his power were waning, or what? I was just expecting, I guess, from a pure fantasy point of view, that it was just a minor setback, and he would learn how to deal with his new limitations. Do you feel like this is just George wanting to make it, I don't know if it's more realistic, because people do bounce back from wounds or whatever and leave full lives anyways, but make it more gritty, maybe more dark? Or do you think that it's just me that has this unnatural expectation to, have a good ending with people?
Well, I don't know if we can really expect a good ending for Tyrion at this point, but it's not just the wound, though, because his father's back and takes up his hand, and he's like, Tywin's so powerful, there's no way that Tyrion can get that amount of power back, and Cersei's also against him, as always. So he goes from being probably the most powerful man in King's Landing to pretty much nothing overnight.
And Tyrion's only there, he was only there as hand and power because Tywin told him to be there. So Tywin coming in and taking over for him was basically the only thing in his way the whole time. So he got in his way, and now Tyrion's downgraded.
Yeah, and the fact that he's being moved from the Tower of the Hand to Maegor's Holdfast and everything, even though it's logic if Tywin took residence in the Tower of the Hand, it's all very symbolic. You know, he's nothing now. He doesn't have his own chambers, and everyone abandoned him. I mean, Bran isn't here. Obviously, no one in his family really cares, with the exception of Jaime, but Jaime's not here. If he gets better or not, I mean, I agree, Patrick, that maybe he could have, in an ideal world, he could have got back some power and everything. But with hindsight, it's really now that it starts to lose everything.
Yeah,
I do.
I totally agree about that. But with hindsight, it's totally obvious that this is what's happening. But at the moment when I was reading this for the first time, I kind of expected something else, in spite of all these arguments that you've already put forth, which I also picked up on. I was just thinking, well, he's making the comeback be more impactful, like having more to overcome, and therefore, when he does, be more of a badass or something like that. But I thought that that Ned's death was only made for impact and not supposed to be an indication of what what everything's gonna be from now on. But yeah, so I guess I was just still kidding myself when I was reading this for the first time that this was gonna be a nice story. At some point.
I think when I watched the show first, so or at this point in this part of the books, I was spoiled from the show as to know like what was going to happen to Tyrion up to season 4. But I think I hoped that Tyrion would bounce back from this, but I didn't know how he could. So I think I was more like wishful thinking. I liked this character at this point, and I wanted to see him over, like, I hated Cersei, so I wanted to see him fight back, but that, of course, doesn't happen.
I do think even knowing what we know, Tyrion can still rise again. Yeah. It's just that point that Alix made earlier, that I think that even though he may gain power again, I think that so much of his idealism and goodness has been deteriorated by this experience. He's so much more cynical, and he was before, but he's even more so now. I just think that will never recover. I think he'll always be this jaded, kind of broken person.
I don't think he'll have lost all his goodness, but I agree he will certainly be a lot more cynical towards goodness. He'll be more inclined to take a more violent but easy approach as compared to a harder but diplomatic approach.
Yeah, Tyrion's still smart, like as we see him in Book 5, but he is completely morally a different person than what we've seen in Clash of Kings. So I don't know if he'll necessarily have like a redemption route. He might have a more powerful route in his future, but it's going to be a different Tyrion. Something
else just to consider, obviously we've talked about how this injury and incapacitating him, influences his loss of power. I do think the physicality of it is important too, the wound itself. I think it just kind of exacerbates the same sort of things that have always held Tyrion down, which is that he's always seen as this, ugly little deformed imp, and this only just, makes that worse. And I think that is part of why no one ever takes him seriously, why no one ever acknowledges his accomplishments, even, the Battle of the Blackwater and everything like that. It's just they just see him as lesser, and that's just another one of those, terrible things about this universe that is pervasive.
Yeah, well, it is a very straightforward thing. It's just... yeah, the implications for Tyrion's story, when you, of course, read it again, and in hindsight, it does spell, maybe not doom, but does not bode well for him from now on. And I guess that, for me, it's just, at least, yeah, I think it took to the Purple Wedding. No, not Purple, Red Wedding, maybe. For me to understand that this is not a good story. This is not a story about good endings and happy outcomes for the people that maybe not. I didn't really care about Robb. He's kind of blah. But But yeah, the Starks as a whole, you want to, of course, have to go fairly well for. At least let them get their revenge, which is something we Vikings understand very well. So in that sense, we just, at that point when I was reading, I didn't understand the implications, at least. Well, anything else on this? Or should we just move on?
Sounds good to me.
Zach is going to be the spearhead on this one. This is the Dany 2 chapter from Storm of Swords, and it's one day later at October 2nd, 299, and yeah, we have now officially moved into Storm of Swords for future chapters.
Goodbye,
So-
Clash of Kings. On
But-
to the future.
But for me, Storm of Swords is definitely my favorite book, apart from Game of Thrones.
So it's your second favorite.
Oh well, it's kind of like saying, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? You do have to say apart from the beginning, and you hope, because it's always gonna have a special place in your heart. So
I don't think everyone thinks that way.
I don't think that way.
I do though. I
Okay.
do think that way though, Patrick.
No, I see what you mean.
I respect and appreciate a Game of Thrones so much for introducing me to the world and just getting me into it, and I think that is important in its own right. But I do think, this book is probably the best in all other respects. So with that, should we jump into it, Dany too?
I think it's a good idea.
Wait, so
All right, let's do it.
just say sorry. No, I just want to note that this is 24 chapters into Storm of Swords ahead of we just ended Clash of Kings, so literally this is we're really jumping around. I just wanted to
Thanks, George.
shut up.
It don't make no sense. All right. With that, Dany enters Astapor and witnesses the decayed remains of the old empire of Gis for the first time. With its harpy, its burning red bricks, and its unsullied. Daenerys meets with the slaver Krasnaz Monaklos to open negotiations for the purchase of an army. Dany feigns ignorance as Krasnaz piles insults against her in his own tongue, but little does he know that she understands every word. Krasnaz brings the unsullied forth, and Missandei explains the rigors of their training, the skills they possess, and their unshakable obedience. Training that requires them to kill a child and strangle their own dog. Arstan argues against the evils of slavery, but Dany is not entirely swayed, knowing how vainly Viserys tried to curry favor from free men. She and her escort leave the dusty, bloody city behind, and Dany confronts Jorah about the folly of this plan, slapping him across the face for it, and perhaps other frustrations as well. Jorah goes to her as Dany looks out at Astapor and contemplates her options. He tells her of Aegon, who won his crown with blood and fire. He tells her of the cruelty and horror of war. Dany says that she would like to do this nobly and honorably as she was told Rhaegar did. Jorah says that is true. Rhaegar fought nobly, Rhaegar fought honorably, and Rhaegar died. Alright, so that's Dany too. I don't want to spend too much time on this, since this is obviously just an appetizer for the main course in these couple of Dany chapters. But I do have a few things about it. First and foremost, that I just think that this is probably the best example, I think, of George R.R. Martin world building, in that we get just enough information to have a full sense of what Astapor and Slaver's Bay are like, without spending too much time, getting really overwrought with it. Though I think to a degree, George may have become too enamored with that and decided to spend more time there, as we know later.
Yeah, I agree. I was like, ooh, we get some Gis history with old Valyria and stuff, but then you can tell he kind of gets a little bit caught up in, as we've seen with the next two books, he gets a little caught up in it all.
Well, actually, about the description of Astapor and everything, it's good world building, I agree, but didn't you guys think that it's a bit everything he can basically imagine to convince us that the Astoporia bad people he does? The slave master is awful and he eats awful things like unborn dogs and stuff like that. And everything it's not very nuanced, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
In a way, it's kind of new for George, because the whole thing about the books is that it's supposed to be not Manichaean, not usual heroic fantasy
caricatures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here I think it's a bit of a caricature. I mean, the bad people are bad and ugly and smell bad, and
Right.
it's kind of. I mean, it struck me there, but I think it's more realistic and nuanced when she's in Meereen. But with Astapor right now, it's just so bad that I can't really understand how such a city would ever really exist.
Yeah.
I don't know if I totally agree on that. I mean, it's seen from a what, 16? No, younger girl.
She married Drogo when she was 14, wasn't she?
I think she's 15 or.
Yeah,
I think she's 15 or 16.
15
right
or
now.
16.
Yeah.
Okay, so a teenage girl.
She's less than 16, I think. At this point.
15 or 16
Let me
doesn't matter
Google it.
really. It's not that much for me. My point is just that it's seen from her viewpoint. And I know when I was that age, I did go to places where I did not like it at all. And I thought everything was just horrible because, I was a teenager. I didn't appreciate nuances, which Dany doesn't do any either. She takes everything to be horrible and negative, and this is also a literary trick to make us feel the same way she does. So that when we later on in Meereen get a more nuanced picture of it, that we warm up to a certain extent to the Meereenese and the Giscari people in the same pace as Dany does. I was just saying, I think that's...
Yeah, I really get your point. It's that she's obviously evolving from Astapor to Meereen too, so it's fair that our view of it evolves as well. But it's just the whole description of all the horrors that they do and eat and think and actually say was just,
Yeah, and with her being an Astapor, it really gives her kind of a conflict because she is confronted with this option to use the soldiers who will be entirely loyal to her. She doesn't have to sway them. She doesn't have to persuade them. She remembers all the years traveling with her brother who tried to make deals with free men who would refuse those deals or go back on them. And her own experiences with trying to make deals with free men like Zaro Zoan Daxos in Karth, and even with her own Dothraki horde, the most of them left because they were free not to follow her. But when she's given the option, here is an army, they will obey only you, but it comes at the cost of using them as tools, not as people. And then also confronted with the idea that, would you rather lose honorably or win dishonorably? And that's the thought we're kind of left with.
Well, I also think that, and this goes a little bit into the next chapter as well, but I feel like it's not necessarily that everything is negative, it's that she's putting a negative light on the nobility of Astapor, not necessarily the people of Astapor. I think there was one thing in the next chapter where she said, everybody came out to look at the dragons, and, she just noted that they were all human.
In the next chapter, she's like, they're just like the Carthene, they just want to look at the dragons because they're in awe of them, and everyone kind of has the same reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, spoilers.
Spoilers?
Next
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's true that definitely the people on top are the most vile, and they are vile. They are evil, and there are the stuff with the unborn puppies and things like that. Obviously, are a bit like mustache twirly evil. Yes, but there are vile people, and these people are clearly vile, and I think that comes across well. Also, just the idea that this culture is so alienating and different than what she's used to.
There's a lot of these things that when George describes it's literally taken out of history or out of literal cultures, and the eating of fetuses and whatever, that's specifically stuff that does happen. Also, dog fetuses or calf fetuses or whatever. That's that's specific cultures. I'm not going to ostracize any cultures right now if it's going to be turn someone against them, but they exist, and it's definitely not unheard of. So if he puts these these traditions onto these people, yes, they of course will end up revolting people who are not, who has ideals that are contrary to what they do. That doesn't make him less. I don't think that literally makes them vile in that sense.
No, if we're gauging the morality of things they do, that probably is not.
No, there's a lot of things, but yeah, every single thing they do is compounded from another culture and another thing that's happened either back in history or is happening right now. So I'm saying that, yeah, of course they're meant to be. She focuses on all the stuff because she has more or less the same ideals as Westeros in a sense, and Westeros is supposed to be by ideals and whatever close to the Western world. So we, of course, sort of have the same ideals in a way, even though we, of course, treat our women slightly better now than they do then.
No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, but I mean, there's of course a few obvious differences, but we do tend to sympathize with the way that the Westerosi think. So to make a culture this alien will certainly prove to also be sometimes, it will feel like it's revolting because we just think differently, so differently that it just cannot be. One thing I say, we have by now accepted that Targaryens have incestuous relationships with their siblings. We literally every time it's Targaryen cast, there's a discussion about, why didn't he just have sex with his sister instead? That's how far we've moved as book readers. But this is is never been like truly made okay by the reader, by the viewpoint character we have. So this is just us being manipulated to not liking this.
Yeah, but this chapter also shows that they have this, not the same, but also negative stereotypes about her, with all the names he calls her when he thinks she doesn't understand.
Yeah. Oh, he's a misogynist. That's for sure.
Yeah, and he's like, she's the Westerosi whore. He doesn't seem to think very highly of Westerosi in general. He says like Arson is a smelling old man or something like that.
Yeah.
Just as disgusted by the notion of eating beef as they are of eating dog. It's interesting. Yeah,
and they think they're savages because they eat beef and pork, and they think their food is more refined. So it's just everyone has their viewpoint, and the other is always kind of villainized.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating concept in general. Like what, based on our own, culturization, what revolts us, like what is really like seriously offensive to us. And you make a lot of good points, Patrick, about how it all depends on your perspective. And we, in many ways, do share the perspective of Dany going into this, and that's reinforced by the way she sees things.
I had one other different point about this chapter that's only in this chapter, I think. So it's noted that Miss Sandy speaks well for someone that hasn't been to Westeros. So I know that I don't think about these theories too much, but does anybody have any Miss Sandy plotting against Dany theories? I've heard those before. I don't think that they're true, but just wondering.
I think she's not. I don't think she's plotting against Dany. Isn't it the thing that the Nathi are very good at picking up information and using it? I think she's just very clever and very good at what she does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she's plotting either, but I mean, she's just this sweet little kid, and it's like the one beautiful thing in this chapter, so I want to hang on to it.
It's what she wants you to think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
okay, well, let me have that, right?
Sure.
Well, where did she learn the common tongue then?
Well, she was
In India.
probably taught by a slave. I guess they have, they train slaves for specific jobs, and they probably have, a language school for interpreters.
Do you think
But
Asterport has a language
less fancy
school?
than that sounds.
I mean, she's probably been carried around. I mean, with multiple owners. So yeah, they picked up that she would be good at translating and being an interpreter, and then that they taught her. I imagine.
And it's not as though the common tongue is not spoken here. Krasnaz clearly speaks it, and probably the other masters too. So there's probably people that could have taught her in whatever her training was.
True.
Yeah, for sure. I also had another thing to say about this chapter precisely. I think it's actually really interesting to see how all of the discussions she has with Austin and Jorah and everything she remembers, and about Koth and about being sold and about her Beggar brother, it all explains why she does what she does in the next chapter, and it's Tyrion, the chapter with Tyrion with kind of a shift in his personality and issues, and I think it's kind of the same with Dany. It's now that we're getting to the whole slavery issue and what she thinks of it, and it was really we get both Austin and Jorah's perspectives on this, and it all combines to one decision for her in the next chapter, and I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I think now that Dany is truly on her own in these first couple chapters in this book, we really do start to see that beginning of that huge, totalizing conflict that she's dealing with for pretty much the rest of the series so far, which is what kind of ruler is she going to be? And that's just the question that plagues her throughout. And we really start to see it here when she has to make this first really big choice. Is she going to be someone who uses slaves, who's willing to conquer and do whatever's necessary? Or is she going to try to find the more honorable path that is explained with Rhaegar? And I think we start to see which decision she makes going forward.
Yeah, also like the fact that it ends on Rhaegar fought nobly, Rhaegar fought honorably, and Rhaegar died is
the big
really
one.
Yeah, it's big foreshadowing for her decision later.
Right. Just to play the what if game for a second, do you guys think there was a better course of action available for Dany than taking the Unsullied? Did she have another way to go that would have worked?
I don't even know if the Unsullied worked out for her because she's still stuck in Moon.
Sure, absolutely. Good point.
point.
So knowing what we know, maybe it was the wrong choice. But is there a better choice that she could have taken?
I'm not sure, because I think Jorah actually has a point that if she just arrives in Westeros with just her dragons, it's going to be a big thing. But still, she has to win the throne and just ask for it. And I'm not sure she has. I think the Unsullied actually worked. It's the next decisions that are gonna trap her in Marine, but the Unsullied were actually a pretty good decision, I think.
Yeah, but I'm wondering what would have happened if she had just gone back to Illyrio without stopping at Slaver's Bay, and just would she have eventually met up with Aegon, or what was his plan for her at this point?
Well, that's the whole question, obviously, but knowing what she knows about her past relationship with Illyrio and the people in Pentos and the way they never gave her brother anything, I understand why she thinks that it's not going to change just because he's dead and she has dragons. So
at this point, I think she made the right decision. I think that at this point she does not have all the information, and she doesn't know how many people in Westeros would support a Targaryen coming back. She just knows what she's been told from Illyrio, essentially. And she was originally slightly cautious about him as well. So in that sense, I think that with the information she has, this was definitely a good decision. She was very easy and cheap, at least in the total. She got a large army for nothing, essentially. So that's cool.
Yeah, also I think she made the right decision of branching out from Illyrio and setting up a power base that didn't rely on him, because Illyrio's shady as fuck, and we don't know what he would have, like, what was his plan and how that would have ended up for her, and if he was really acting in her best interest. And
of course, with Aegon, and if we do agree with the theory that they're clearly supporting Aegon more because of some kind of Blackfire relationship, or perhaps other familial ties, she would not have the same autonomy, even if she was part of that same sort of power.
Yeah, definitely.
Attempt.
I think maybe the more, the thing that is a little bit unclear is if she did the right thing living Astapor the way she did. I mean, with the new, leaders and everything, and the way it all goes down afterwards. I don't know what she could have done better with that, but because it's not her fault they couldn't govern themselves. But we see that it actually has a big impact on the story later, the whole mess that is Astapor.
I guess I would say a different option would be somehow to, sack the city, take all the gold they can find, buy some more boats, and possibly use forced labor to maybe build more boats instead of marching on the Slaver's Bay and then staying there eventually because you've been so entrenched in their politics. That was kind of stupid. But yeah, of course, right now she doesn't have enough boats, so therefore she has to march them. She'd just been a bit more harsh to begin with, and sack the city and use forced labor. She could probably have made enough boats to transport her people over and just launch an attack on, or maybe go to Pentos first and then launch an attack on Westeros thereafter. She's not ready for this on a character arc, but that would have been more effective, I guess.
Just the only thing is that I don't think that 8,000 Unsullied alone could take Westeros, so it's clear that, and this isn't really considered much really at any point, but she needs more than that to take Westeros. And I'm also one of those people, and we'll have occasion, I'm sure, to debate this until the end of time or whenever we finish this reread. I'm one of those people that does think it was important that she went to Meereen, because I think that we see clearly in this chapter the start of the idea that Dany doesn't really know what it takes to be a ruler, and she has to learn that. And it's not just important because of all the narrative confusion of setting her up to have the assets to wage an attack on Westeros, but it's also just important for her as a person to learn what it takes to rule, and also to learn what kind of ruler she is. And she really does not get that until she goes through the trials and tribulations of Meereen.
Yeah, I don't agree completely, because Meereen is such a different city and different culture than Westeros is. So with her Westeros sensibilities, she would be much more equipped. She will at least be better at making the decisions that the lords and whatever would agree upon, to a certain extent at least, rather than here where every decision she makes from Westerosi opinions. And that sort of always steps someone on over the toes, steps on someone's toes.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's clearly not the same. You go ahead, Casey.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, but to counter that, is Westeros the same Westeros as it was when the Targaryens were ruling? I think that Westeros is in a bit of a transition period, and that Dany can kind of make it her own. I don't think she necessarily has to be completely, quote-unquote, Westerosi to rule Westeros well.
No, definitely not. But she would still make choices that would be more or less in line with the common ideology of the lords and ladies, because she kind of thinks the same way, to begin with at least.
Like an underlying philosophy and cultural ideas that she would share. And so I feel like it's more the other way around, that kind of practicing ruling Meereen doesn't really give her much experience that would help a lot in Westeros, maybe, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree, actually.
Yeah,
it would give her some relevant experience, obviously, but not.
Yeah, these all good points. I feel like for me, it's less about, and it's clear, it's true. You cannot detach yourself from the culture you're in when you're making decisions as a leader. You have to clearly, tailor that based on the people that you control. But I just think it's more about Dany building her own philosophy as a leader, less about the philosophy that she's, existing within. It's more about her learning how to make decisions and learning what exactly she wants her role to be, because that is fairly consistent. What type of person she is is going to be now, what type of person, or what type of, place she is ruling.
Sure, but you don't rule alone. And
I agree with that.
It depends a lot on the circumstances. This isn't like one.
And part of this, obviously, the narrative reason that this decision is made is that we can't. It would be kind of it would kind of destroy it would be an anticlimax if Dany went to Westeros, won, and then spent 2 books learning to rule in Westeros, because that's the goal, that's the thing that she needs to get, and so when she has it, it kind of is meaningless. So that that's the narrative sort of explanation for it.
Yeah, but that's why she could have gone to Pentos with all her things, and then maybe the Free Cities could oppose her in some way because they don't want another Targaryen. I mean, the Bravos would certainly not enjoy that coming back, so maybe they would have to somehow launch an attack on Westeros, but try to wheel and deal with the Free Cities to at least be able to go past, and then Tyrion could come in, swoop in, and save the day as the prince was promised, and everything would be okay then. And then that could take some books, right?
Yeah, but that's not the kind of story this is.
Well,
I think.
Yeah.
I think
I would enjoy that.
The whole point about her going to Slaver's Bay and trying to rule there is that she gets confronted to a whole different set of issues than she would if she was just in Westeros. And yeah, she's just constantly faced with the dilemma of freeing all the slaves, but also making it a sustainable system for them to live in as free people and to coexist with the slavers. And that's a whole political question that wouldn't be that just wouldn't happen in Westeros. And I feel like the fact that she gets to Meereen and stays there for way too long, and we're all so frustrated with that, is an integral part to the story and to her arc. And it just wouldn't be the same story if she just showed up in Westeros and won and started ruling there.
Definitely not. I mean, she would need hardships at some point after this. But I think that the idea I understand why he's doing this, because in a hero's journey you have to have hardships, you have to be in a, turmoil about your own personality, and then something happens that makes things clear. So that's essentially what Meereen is doing. She is slowly chipping away at her core character until she, by force is forced to realize that, hopefully, because we don't actually know what she's thinking about what to do now when Dance of Dragons is done, but we hope that she will go back to what's essentially the character that we need her to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, do you think that she's only going to end up ruling Westeros, if she ends up ruling Westeros at all? Do you think that she would end up ruling just Westeros? Do you think that maybe her power would extend over to Essos in the end because of this Meereen plot?
Would there even be things to rule in Westeros?
Right. Yeah. That's always the caveat. This is all going downhill, probably.
I mean, I don't think she has enough people left when things are done here in Meereen that she can actually keep control of that city as well. I think that honestly everything is going to hell in a handbasket quite quickly, and she should just realize that she is not meant to rule the Meereenese. She's meant to rule Westeros. So she should just get back, or at least go back, and then maybe we can go to Tolney George, and she will rule Westeros for the final run, and then die, whatever. That could be totally George, whatever. But at least figure out that Meereen can go F themselves, essentially, because that's essentially what she has to do. Because fuck Meereenese.
Yeah, but I feel like her character also is conflicted because she does care about the Meereenese and she cares about the freedom of the slaves, and she can't really bring herself to let go of that.
Yeah,
this
but
is of course what plagues her for a whole book,
Yes.
as we'll get to. I think these were all really good points, especially about how obviously the ruling situation is hugely different in Westeros than it is in Meereen. I do think it was still valuable, extremely valuable for a character to go through that. But you're right, it's complicated. There's so many different reasons narratively, character wise and otherwise that motivated this whole mess.
yeah, £, fuck the Meereenese.
That's one way of putting it.
And I've got a new card for the thing.
There you go. That's what we're here for, is to get more cards against Westeros.
Yeah.
You want to move to Dany 3 or?
No, I think we're really good at doing things very thoroughly today. So I think we've done as much as we can on this without being too specific. So let's just move on to Dany 3. And 2 days later, after the previous chapter, and 4 more chapters into A Storm of Swords, we have another Dany chapter, and Alix describes this. Take it away.
All right. In one of the great pyramids of Astapor, Dany breaks the news to the good masters that she will buy all of the 8,600 Unsullied they have, plus all of the boys still in training. The Togar-clad slavers are reluctant at first to even put those untrained youth on the table for negotiation. Dany offers to pay double, but it soon becomes clear that her trading goods will never buy her enough eunuchs, even if she throws in Captain Grolio's ships. When she declares the good masters may have a dragon in exchange for all of the Unsullied, everyone is surprised, to say the least, and Arstan Whitebeard even voices his disapproval, earning him an early dismissal from the meeting. Unsurprisingly, though, the good masters accept this offer and choose Drogon as their compensation, and they even throw Missandei in as a gift, because who needs a 10-year-old with language skills when you can have a fucking dragon? As she walks out of the pyramid and onto the Plaza of Pride, feeling sickened by what she's just done, Dany reprimands Whitebeard, and then turns to her new slave, asks her name, and immediately frees her, offering to take her on as a handmaid instead, and explaining the dangers this might entail. Dany then asks her about the Unsullied, hoping for more honest answers now that the girl is no longer beholden to that giant asshat crassness, and learns that 2 of the Unsullied she is about to buy are Missandei's brothers. Back on board the Balerion, Dany has a restless night. She walks out to talk to Jorah about Eorae and Viserys for some reason, then manages to get some sleep. She dreams of being in Rhaegar's place, riding to the Trident on a dragon instead of a horse, fighting an army armored all in ice. She melts the host away with dragonfire, thinking this was how the battle was meant to have gone, and wakes suddenly, feeling someone's presence in the cabin with her. The mysterious figure reminds her that to go north, you must go south. To reach the west, you must go east. Oh my god, I really wonder who this is. But when Dany steps out of bed to get some light in the cabin, Quaithe is nowhere to be found. The next morning, Dany and her entourage ride into Astapor with all the prestige they can muster. They reach the Plaza of Punishment, where all the Unsullied have been gathered, and Kraznys greets them, asking for his payment. Once all of Dany's training goods have been piled up before the slavers, Drogon is brought out on a chain, to Kraznys' delight. Dany hands him the chain in exchange for a whip symbolizing her ownership of the slaves. As soon as the transaction is done, she turns to the Unsullied and addresses them in High Valyrian, but only old Grasden takes note of this, for the other masters are too busy attempting to move the dragon. It is time to cross the Trident, Dany thought, as she wheeled and rode her silver back. Her blood riders moved in close around her. You are in difficulty, she observed. He will not come, Kraznys said. There is a reason. A dragon is no slave. And Dany swept the lash down as hard as she could across the slaver's face. Kraznys screamed and staggered back, the blood running red down his cheeks into his perfumed beard. The harpy's fingers had torn his features half to pieces with one slash, but she did not pause to contemplate the ruin. Drogon, she sang out loudly, sweetly, all her fear forgotten. Dracarys. And basically all hell breaks loose. Kraznys' eyes melt and run down his cheeks. The Plaza of Punishment blows apart into blood and chaos. Extravagant hairdos flame up. Hands get chopped off. And eventually Grazan tries to command the Unsullied to defend their old masters. But Rakeru puts an arrow through his mouth. All through this chaos, the Unsullied had been standing unmoving until Dany calls out to them to slay the masters, slay the soldiers, and strike the chains off every slave.
I love this chapter.
I love this
Yeah,
chapter
me
so
too.
much. It's so
Got
awesome.
the goosebumps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I literally shed a tear when this came up in the show. I was like, this is so good. This is what I was been waiting for, and then the rest of the season just sucked.
Yeah, I think that went pretty well, didn't it? That
the-
scene.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah.
That was almost
Just
completely
went down
to the
from
letter.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, it was really, really moved there. I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be the best season ever. I was like, and then
No.
and then no.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
I literally, I wrote my notes instead of typed them up this time, and I, like, wrote revolution in all caps, like, across half the page, and I was so pumped at reading this chapter. I guess this is the second time I've read it, so it's awesome. I felt the same good vibe.
For me, like, Dany was probably my favorite character at the time of reading this for the first time. So this was just a huge, fist bump moment, because this is, I mean, we haven't really gotten something like this yet. You could make the argument the whole, the Marine slave pit was something similar. But this was just like such a, what I love about it, my favorite part about it is not just, the badass reversal of it, but just that it was built toward, this was the best way for Dany to utilize her playing ignorant, not knowing, pretending not to know what they're saying, and just like turning it on them. Because the reason it worked really was that they had no idea that she could speak Valyrian. They just like thought so little of her, and she completely flips that on them, and it was awesome.
And
So
then-
that actually brings me into the question: did you know that it was happening before it happened?
I don't think so. I mean, that was a really long time ago, but I don't think.
Because
I
I
don't
did.
think I saw
I
that
did
coming.
actually know, or if have
Oh,
a.
you knew.
Of course.
Well, I knew the jig was up. Something was happening, and it was really not going to be good for the masters. Of course, she had an. I mean, yeah, I basically knew that something really horrible for the masters was going to happen when she opted to buy every single one. That was kind of see. Okay, so she's leaving them with no soldiers. She wants to fuck them over and take back the dragon or something like that.
When do you think that she actually made the decision to do that? I mean, because at first, does she just want to buy the Unsullied, and then she has to throw the dragon, and then she decides to not let it go that way? Or I don't know. Because this is a related question in my mind. I'm not sure what I thought at the moment, but what I'm thinking now is when did she actually decide to do all this?
For me, it was definitely off screen, like between the chapters. She figured out that's how she wanted to do this, and she always had when she made the deal about putting in the dragon, she already had the idea to do this, but she needed Quaith's words to steel her resolve, essentially.
I don't
She's
know if it was Quaith or if it was a dream about Rhaegar, because when she starts talking to the slaves and getting her dragon back, she thinks it's time to cross the Trident, and that's like what happened in her dream.
Mm.
Yeah.
And just melting that army with her dragon, like she's full conqueror mode.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
And
That's foreshadowing. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
she realizes that she needs her dragons to be a queen, and she can't conquer Westeros without her dragons.
Mm-hmm.
So you think she knew she would have to bring the dragons in the negotiation, and that after that it would play out like it did? She knew
I
that
think
they would
that
never
was her
accept
plan.
without the dragons, right?
Yeah, I think that was her plan all along.
Okay.
I
And
think
of
she
course
knew I think she knew it was still a risk, though, because she.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But she was hoping for it to work out, and it did. But yeah, I think from the moment she made the decision to buy the Unsullied, Well, when I first read this, I was really surprised because I thought there's only two possible solutions. Either she walks away and tries to conquer Westeros without the Unsullied, or she buys the Unsullied and becomes a slave owner. And there was no third option, but she's smarter than me, so she found one.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? She doesn't actually buy them. She just has a big plan and gets away with it.
Yeah.
But in the previous chapter, she's wondering what to do, and she's actually considering buying for real at least some Unsullied. So yeah, I guess that's my. I didn't think maybe that Dany was that skilled. That I mean, the plan I'm okay with. The fact that it's just her negotiating skills did not seem to be really good before that. So it's the first part of the chapter when she's negotiating a deal with the slave masters. I was a bit unsure about that. I mean, because if the whole plan had been decided afterwards, it means that this whole negotiation was thought in advance to happen this way. And yeah, I guess I'm underestimating her.
Well, I think from the start she wanted the slave masters to think she was less smart than she actually was. She didn't want them to know she spoke Valyrian, and she kind of plays into the role of the young girl who doesn't really know anything. And at first I think she just used that tactic with no specific objective, and then later in the negotiation I think she just already had her plan to offer a dragon but then take it back.
So also from her perspective, every single slave that has been taken that has not been born, and like another second generation slave, they have been taken with violence, and the slave masters, they still claim to own them in that sense. So that she uses violence, she pays the iron price essentially to purchase these slaves. And for her, that seems to be okay. And then I'm guessing that's also why the Unsullied doesn't do anything, because why is that different from how they've been treated before, essentially?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So I think it's a transaction. It's just, death for slaves.
It's a very Viking way of thinking. Yeah.
So any other questions? Any other points you want to make?
I wanted to make one point about the subtlety of Dany's assertion of power over the Astapori. I feel like you can kind of tell in the things that she even wears that, maybe her Carthene outfit was worn for a reason, and the next day she gets up in all, I think it's Dothraki type clothing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of shows that she's I am different than Astapori, and I'm wearing different clothes. She knows that wearing the Carthene gown will be a bit provocative to the men of Astapor. And I think it's just showing that this is time for a change. Although I think that later on she does go back a little bit on that and she starts wearing the togar and all that. But it's interesting, the subtlety of it.
I think she only starts wearing the togar when she's in Meereen. Yeah. And she's asserting herself as the ruler there.
Mm-hmm. But she kind of assimilates a little bit there into... Because it's noted that the togar is only worn by the freeborn, so she's wearing the things that people wore who she's technically kind of against, which is a bit of a juxtaposition, but...
Yeah, but I think every outfit she wears, she makes a choice to wear that. Especially with the togar, she keeps referring to it as the bunny ears, or the floppy ears, because she doesn't feel like it represents her, but it represents power to the people she's trying to rule.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I have to say that almost every single chapter of Sansa's, there's also a large focus on what she's wearing and how that has an effect. What is this meant to do? So I think it's just, as a lady or a princess, you sort of use your clothing as a negotiation tool and a diplomatic tool, and they're just an all-around tool for getting your point through to a much higher extent than any normal lord would think about it. They would just think, well, that looks nice. I'll wear that.
Except for Theon. Theon cares about clothes a lot.
Yeah, and can't even remember their names. But yeah, there's a few lords or lordlings that have a large focus on what they're wearing and trying to mirror maybe their bigger brothers or just be the most gallant person possible. So.
Well, I also think that George kind of uses this as symbolism because he can, because particularly Sansa has to be more quiet. He tries to make everything a little bit symbolic of what's going on in that scene with what they're wearing, so it's interesting. So I have another point going back to something that Zach said earlier, if we want to get back to the chapter.
No, let's talk more about Vikings.
Wow. I did want to say that I think this is, after thinking about it for a little bit, I think this is the first person point of, or not first person, but first point of view chapter that we actually see something win, because everything that Rob is doing in Westeros is off page, or like they say that it happened, but it's not actually happening right before us. And in this chapter, we finally see something do good instead of something go horribly wrong, like with Tyrion. And that's why this chapter is really exciting.
That's really cool. Good point.
You mentioned Tyrion, and he did actually win the foray on the mountain in Mountain Clans. With the Mountain Clans.
It's a very small.
Was he even awake
that's
for
a victory. That's a victory. And he killed someone, didn't he?
He did.
So.
Yeah, but it was really. It doesn't strike me as like a big moment, though.
No, and it doesn't even feel like a victory. I mean, it seems like they're all even deeper in despair after that whole sequence.
Maybe, but it is probably the first time that Tyrion has killed.
Good point.
Monumental point, nevertheless. Okay, well, that's, again, yeah. It does feel very big in the narrative. I mean, when you're reading this is something that's going to have a very large effect on everything going on from now on. That's true. I mean, nothing like that has happened before that. Unless it's negative, of course.
Yeah. And literally, we're not going to see the effects of this in Westeros for a fairly long time, because this is 24 and 27 chapters into A Storm of Swords. We're going to have to go through everybody else first before they even kind of figure out what's going on in Essos.
Okay. I thought there would be more discussions about this.
I think that we brought up a lot of things that kind of float between this chapter and the Dany chapter before, as far as is this the best plan possible?
Yeah, I think we've already covered a lot of Dany's story even beyond this.
I mean, Quaithe does come up again, but I feel like we're all kind of she has to go backwards in order to go forwards before she goes to Westeros, and that's why it's taking so long, probably because prophecy.
well, the only other thing I'd say about Quaithe in particular is that I think that it symbolizes maybe an inflection point in Dany's arc. It symbolizes a big moment about to happen, perhaps. That's when she chooses to appear. I'd have to actually look at all the time she shows up to confirm that, but it seems that way.
So, speaking of Quaithe, in the Targaryen cast, there was people saying that they might be sure Sea Star being Quaithe, just living unnaturally long. I mean, and that just right now dawned on me that there's a clear point to this. Who would actually want to talk specifically to Dany, unless Dany truly is the prince that was promised, and that's truly how it is? Who other than another Valyrian-blooded person would have this much interest in this person, in a person, and whatever happens with it? Unless it's either a person that shares blood with them, like familiar ties, or someone who actually literally know that this is the prince that was promised and the only possible savior for Westeros.
Well, I don't know if I want to believe that, but the fact that it could be Shira Sea Star would be at least a nice parallel to. I mean, we obviously also have Bloodraven and kind of Biddle still with the Golden Company, so I guess it would be from a literary point of view interesting to have all or almost all of the Great Bastards into play. But apart from that, we can also, I mean, the whole Great Bastards and Blackfire rebellions even really conceived the first time we heard of Quaithe, and was it really clear in Martin's head already? I mean, that's all I think, but. Yeah.
It could easily be retroactively applied, but yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah, definitely.
I just feel like that there's no real evidence for Shiera Seastar being her, besides the point you make, Patrick, that it would give a motive to a degree because they both have Valyrian blood, but I feel like that's tenuous at best, and there's like no other evidence that there's any connection.
Have you ever seen them in the same room together?
There you go. Good point.
Yeah.
That's sorted then. Okay, moving on.
So the only thing I have to say is, you're totally right, Marie. There's one thing that's literally the literary effect that it has. Because if we then theorize that Dany will not join up with Fagon, and there'll be a dance between the dragons, then there would be 3 different factions, all controlled by either a little person that was a great bastard, or the ghost of a great bastard. You know, because the Golden Company is with Fagon. Whatever is happening up north, it has a clear tie to Bloodraven, and you know, Quaithe, if she's a Seastar, she will have an influence on how Dany's reacting. So she's the third bastard doing, yeah. So 3 bastards.
I think that would actually be really neat, but yeah.
I think
I'm not a huge fan of this theory.
Now I just have this image of this like Illuminati like organization controlling all the events in Westeros.
They're lizard people.
Yeah.
No, but I think, well, Quaithe is from Ashai. Well, she's supposed to be, and I feel like in Karth, like, people know who she is and they've seen her around, and she has kind of a reputation. So I don't think she's anyone in particular. She's just someone from Ashai, which is a mysterious, magical place, and she probably has prophetic visions, but she's just, yeah, like a random magic user, crosses Dany's path, and afterwards, like, the visions that Dany has, they're just visions. And they just happen when Dany has a dilemma and she's trying to figure out what to do. And it's always the same sentences that come back: to go north, you must go south, etc. Yeah. So I don't think she's anything other than what she's presented as. Maybe that's too boring for you guys. I don't know.
No, I agree.
We must go full crackpot.
We don't do sensible theories on this podcast.
She is
Not
Dany from the future.
everyone has to be someone.
Dario.
I actually like Dany from the future better than Shiera Seastar.
No, she's Dany and John's daughter, Janny.
Oh no!
From
Janny.
Janny. I honestly, though, I feel like we're never gonna actually find out if Quaithe is anybody, like, or like what her origin is. Actually, I feel like we're never gonna find that out.
That would be really frustrating, but I could see that.
Yeah.
She's just a prophet. Like, she's just telling Dany where to go. She's really mysterious, and I feel like George has criticized prophecy and us, like, trying to interpret them so much that he's probably going to be like, I'm not going to tell him.
That'd be horrible.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Quaithe. I mean, I don't really see the point of her, but I mean, there's the big quote and the visions, but I'm not sure what Dany actually really makes of it. So
yeah, even though you might not like it, I think it still qualifies as my addition to the Seastar thing. Still qualifies as a crackpot theory, so it goes crackpot theory number 14 for me, and then Janny of course is 15.
He's keeping score.
I've always done that. You should.
I think. Well, I seem to remember a crackpot theory number 14 from like 2 years ago. So
no,
your count
you're wrong. You're wrong. That was 12. Pretty sure that was 12.
Okay, we're gonna need a full list, Patrick.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Right
I'm
now.
gonna have to listen
You need to go
all
back
of
through
my
every
episodes
single
again.
one.
Yeah.
That's gonna be so difficult. Listening to
You
myself.
have to do that after you edit this podcast, though.
Yeah, maybe I can do that whilst, because then I can edit my own glorious moments into this podcast.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Okay, maybe we can move on to Arya 1 because we're gonna lose Patrick.
Yeah. Well,
That's
you.
true.
Yeah.
The sooner
Go
we
ahead.
finish, the sooner he can do his list of.
Yeah. Exactly. So so last one is Arya 1, and it's gonna be October 3rd. So after.
No, it's actually a day
Day
before,
before.
but
Yeah,
Arya's chapter goes over a bunch of more days later than...
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see that.
Yeah,
I can
agree.
see that now. So and then we jump 24 chapters back again. So that's cool. That's how I would have done it.
Right.
So yeah, definitely. And this is Tanja, who's gonna show us what she's done.
First of all, I want to point out that there's a full castle recording of this chapter. So if you haven't listened to this, you should, because it's really awesome. You should just edit the full castle recording in instead of a summary. I think that would be a good idea.
I like it.
But yeah, okay, done. Good. No, so this is actually, I don't know, it's a nice little chapter, but there's not that much happening. I mean, it's mostly Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie traveling away from Harrenhal towards Riverrun. Hopefully, possibly, they have some doubts about whether they're going in the right direction, but that's what they're trying to do anyway. And there's a wolf pack hanging around in the same area, with one particularly large wolf that at some point howls back at Arya when she howls at the wolf. And then at the end of the chapter, Arya walks into Nymeria and kills a couple of brave companions. And that's pretty much it. There's not that much happening in that chapter.
So I have a point about this chapter. This whole moss thing about going north, Arya, I mean, Westeros might have it the opposite of what actually happens, but moss grows on the north side and not the south side like the books say, so...
Is it just Arya getting it wrong then?
Yeah. Well, maybe Westeros's
Or
moss
it's George
are
getting it
totally different, or George is getting it wrong.
Could be, do we know? We don't know which. Do we know which hemisphere
I don't know.
Westeros is on? Because that would be
God, science.
Well, it has an Arctic circle in the top, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I would
But
guess
how
that it's
big's
a
the planet?
Then,
northern
Oh, no,
hemisphere. Yeah, we don't know that we
could
don't
be-
know the shape of the planet or anything like that. So
Could be a square.
Maybe they're on the inside of the planet. We don't know.
yeah, it's a donut or an inside. Yeah,
In
of
this
the
universe.
Donut's done it. Or like a Mobius strip.
Yep.
Physics doesn't matter in this universe.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think we've established that.
So I also just want to add that in reality, most moth does not keep to one side of the tree.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a common misconception.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember reading that fact when I was like 8 or 9, and then going to the forest and looking at trees and being like, I have no idea where north is because there's moss everywhere.
But then I wonder.
So-
I mean, that could also just be Arya getting it wrong, because how much would she realistically ever have needed that knowledge?
No, but it does sound like something that Maester Lewin would teach them.
Yeah. I guess.
I feel like this
But if
whole
you've never
chapter-
applied it, you could get it wrong. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like this whole chapter is like survival 101 with Arya trying to say certain things about we have to go this way, it's the safest way, we have to stay awake, it's the safest way, we'll get out of here, it's all gonna be okay.
yeah.
They're all about as bad at reading maps as I am.
One thing I found interesting about this chapter is that there's a couple of points where we kind of have pointed out to us how different Arya is in terms of her upbringing and her education. So like at some point when she says she can read or write or something, Hot Pie looks at her as if she said she could walk on water or something like that. Because to him, reading and writing is such a, I don't know, miraculous skill.
It's something
and then she also
people have.
Yeah, and then she also points out that she's used to riding because she's been basically riding all her life, and Gendry and Hot Pie, having grown up in the city, wouldn't have any substantial experience riding. So I guess it's kind of interesting to see the differences a bit.
They all have their own skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But you can definitely see the castle upbringing, and I mean, there's a couple of other chapters where we kind of get similar things pointed out to us.
It's also interesting how fully in control Arya is here. Whereas, in their previous travels before going to Harrenhal, it seemed like there was more of a sort of democratic situation. But after that experience and just Arya knowing more about herself and knowing more about her friend, she ends up being the one in charge.
Do you think that also is because, though, Gendry knows her nobility status?
It's probably part of it, and just generally bowing to her wisdom, yeah.
Might have mixed this up with the show, but didn't she kick Lum's ass or something like that? She kicked one of the kids' ass. Nymeria?
Green Hands or something?
Wasn't it that?
Well, no, she kicked Hot Pie.
Okay, yes. So she established her dominance.
In the one thing.
That was way back, though. That was before
that was
they...
part 14.
Sometimes you think, well, it's so far back. Did I just see it in the show, or what? Or did I just? Is this just wishful thinking? But she definitely established her dominance over Hot Pie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah, that happened.
I think Hot Pie is more, well, Gendry has a pretty strong personality and he's really stubborn, so I think if he didn't know that Arya was noble, he would try to take the lead. But Hot Pie, I feel like, is more of a follower in any case.
Yeah.
So even though he doesn't know who Arya is, he's okay with following her because he feels like she's more qualified, I guess.
Also, there has to be a synergy between her and Nymeria. Nymeria is also the pack leader.
Yeah.
So,
What I don't understand is why they don't just reunite somehow. I don't know why Nymeria doesn't just go and...
because that wouldn't work for the story, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, and because Arya doesn't realize what's happening. Like,
But why doesn't Nymeria just come and hang out?
Well, I don't think Nymeria is even aware of the... I don't know, like, these dreams seem different from Bran's. It seems like she's just a passenger as opposed to being in control.
Yeah, but at the same time, Nymeria does things that... we wonder why she would do it if she wasn't linked to Arya. I mean, when she brings Cat from the water and everything. So I'm also wondering why they don't just meet. And I mean, Arya knows that Nymeria is around. She actually thinks about her. She knows that she left her somewhere near where she is right now. And so, I don't know. It always seemed to me like a tragic thing, but I don't understand why she doesn't just try to find her.
We know that Arya is one to hold grudges. Would we also think that Nymeria is also one to hold a grudge against Arya telling her to run away?
Right.
It could be. I just think it's, as we learn in this chapter, the Riverlands is a much bigger place than we maybe give credit for, and that they certainly give credit for.
But she sees Nymeria from afar at one point, right? I mean, that's presumably the wolf. She sees a wolf pack. She sees a wolf pack, and she howls at the wolf pack, and the largest wolf howls back.
You could be right. Yeah, I think that's right.
And I would have assumed. I mean, like we don't know that, right? But I would have assumed that's Nymeria.
I don't think so.
I think
it's possible.
Yeah,
we
don't know. We don't know.
I definitely think it's possible, and I think it's only simply just because George doesn't want them to meet up yet. That's not happening.
Other consideration.
But we would also have to say that this is pretty much all like subconsciously this is happening. She is not aware of things happening. The only time she's ever consciously done anything with warging is when she arrives in the House of Black and White, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't seem to know up to that point that it's something she can do. So.
No, exactly. So she wouldn't do it, and right as we see Nymeria, in general in Arya's dreams, Nymeria is pretty content with her situation as it is.
I guess that's true.
Right. She is more, it is part of the reason because of their separation. She just is more feral, and that is just what she is. So she might not even, getting back to Casey's point, she might not even want to reunite with Arya.
Yeah. Well, not to begin with at least, but if Arya develops her working skills, she will force Nymeria back.
I think they'll see each other again somehow.
So that's
before she dies in the snow in Westeros, horrible.
Yeah, but that's my view of it at least.
So I have a question. Do we think that Arya would have made it to River Run without Gendry or Hot Pie? Because she does at one point complain that she could go faster without them, but I feel like they as much keep her a bit more together with stuff. Like, for example, when she falls asleep, Gendry's the one that wakes her up. I feel like she actually does need them, even though they end up causing problems for her in the future.
Maybe if she had, one of them, she'd be... If it was just Gendry, she'd probably still be fine and she'd be faster.
Yeah. It's all Hot Pie's fault.
Hot Pie.
But I'm not a fan of Hot Pie.
It was so adorable, him with the cheese falling asleep. Too close to home, honestly.
Let me also point out, one of my favorite sentences in this chapter, or possibly ever, is she used her cheese to point. I just really like that.
But I do have to point out from a role-playing perspective that a 3-party group is more or less needed if you want to have watches through the night and have a full night's sleep anyways.
Because if she was alone, she would just have to sleep and
hope that nobody
no one
discovered.
watching. Yeah,
I mean,
unless she just sets out to find Nymeria and then goes on with Nymeria at her side. But yeah,
don't split the party.
It's essentially, unless you're totally super ninja and you can become invisible and whatever, you would want to move in a party, especially in a war-torn land. Also, another thing is that's a different thing because she's obviously emotionally tied to these people because there are the only people that knows the Arya as she is now. Nobody would recognize the way she's acting other than them. Because
her family would recognize her. But...
No, they wouldn't recognize the persons that she's become. But Gendry and Hot Pie have been there for the journey. So they, essentially, it's like when you meet a child after a few years and they've grown up and they look completely different. Essentially, this is just with her personality. Same thing. And maybe she's afraid that nobody will recognize her if she doesn't bring people that actually knows who she is as she is now.
Doesn't she think about that? Am I making this up? I think at some point she also thinks about this in a different chapter, about how different she is and looks, and whether her parents would still want her back or something. Yeah,
definitely that part, but I'm not sure if she reflects about Gendry and Hot Pie being her anchor, so to say.
Yeah, no.
I think she does, not explicitly, but she does think of them as friends, and it's pretty heartbreaking for her when she has to let them go. So yeah, that's a really good point, Patrick. I never thought about it that way.
I think also in this chapter she specifically says this is my pack. So
yeah.
Regardless of how much they're keeping her back, she has to stay with them.
Yeah, so I think that's both a practical reason why she needs them, but also a very emotional reason why she brings them along. Yeah. Also, when you face battle with a person, you tend to form a strong bond that makes it more like a sibling thing or something like that. A battle brother, so to say. The fight at the Holdfast would also might have done something towards that. Anything else?
I would just say there's not much to this chapter, obviously, but it is super cool and atmospheric. There's the one passage. There's the that was the day without a dawn. Slowly the skylight around them, but they never saw the sun. Black turned to gray and colors crept timidly back into the world. It's just great writing, I love that. And if you do, as Tanja says, if you do want to hear that in an awesome audio Australian accent style, you can check that out at VOK 119. They did that, so that's pretty great.
Yeah, it's such a good recording. It's a really nice chapter to read, even though it doesn't have much action or anything.
Yeah,
it's good. It's so good for like a first character chapter in a book. It's just it's perfect for that.
But also that description there, it's totally Tolkien, right? It's like a thing that almost a way that Tolkien could describe the travel against through Mirkwood or something like that. I think that when George he describes like the weather and the lack of light as being a character in itself, that's totally how Tolkien used Mirkwood and the lack of light there. I see what you mean. So I'm just saying that, and George has said this several times, that of course Tolkien is one of the major inspirations, of course. So it just makes sense for me.
Kind of a big deal. Don't know if you've heard about him. I just make so convincing arguments that people just don't know what to say afterwards.
Yeah, we're just so stunned.
Yeah.
Oh my god, he's so smart.
I mean, I'm not going to explain Tolkien because...
But I feel like, and this is pretty obvious regarding the length of the series, but George takes his time a lot more than Tolkien with his descriptions, and like this chapter, nothing really happens plot-wise, and I feel like in at least in Lord of the Rings, in every chapter there's action, and there's like the plot moves forward, but here, like this chapter doesn't really move the plot forward. It's just transition where they're wandering in the Riverlands, and it's a great atmospheric chapter, but if it wasn't there, we would understand the plot all the same.
I don't know. I mean, so Bina and I are doing the real-time reread at the moment, and there's like a lot of pages where nothing's
slow,
which I don't mind.
Yeah.
But it is not, like, at times it doesn't move very
we do have to address the literary elephant in the room with the first book of Lord of the Rings. It's
nothing happens. I'm not complaining.
Just nothing.
It's very important for the story and the development that you can see that things have not gone to hell yet.
Yeah.
It's very important.
And I think it's fantastic. I'll defend it. But in terms of stuff happening,
not so much.
Yeah, sorry. I haven't read Lord of the Rings in a long time.
You should have joined us for the real-time thing.
Yeah, but I don't have a copy of it.
I bought a new one.
I got them from a library when I first read them.
Right.
And I never bought them. But the last Tolkien I've read was The Silmarillion, and it's a very different writing style. So I should probably reread Lord of the Rings.
You should start a real-time reread this year.
Yeah, maybe next year.
Or next year.
It's always the thing to say.
Yeah.
I think, doesn't it? I think I should know this.
It starts in like April.
But I think it starts in 3018. So if you started it,
it's like 1,000 years though.
If you really want to do the real time reread.
Yeah.
Lol.
You have to wait until the 5th age.
Okay, well, unless we have something more to say about this, or again confirm or disapprove on the theory that Arya is crazy as fuck.
This chapter is fine, right? I mean, I don't think.
Yeah, she's just survival skills.
No, she's not doing anything particularly crazy.
I don't know.
No, it's okay.
Let's go completely wolf girl when she in her way of thinking about things and I don't know.
And Bran isn't crazy.
She has a telepathic connection to a mythical animal. So I don't know if you can really compare her thoughts to like a regular person.
But isn't that the way insanity has been defined? That you really that you don't think.
You have mythical telepathic.
No, but when you go completely outside the spectrum of what's normal for humanity, for human interaction.
I don't think that's the definition of crazy per se.
No, but that's how it's been defined several times. Like this is weird. you must be crazy. You must have hysterical or whatever. Stuff like that. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, but the dire wolves are really magical.
This is a fantasy world.
They live in a donut-shaped world, so...
Their planet could very well be a square.
Not even like a
No, but
cube.
there's definitely a cube would be maybe better.
Where on the back of four
There's only
elephants.
2 dimensions.
Well, at least some of the characters are. What?
Like John.
I didn't say it. I didn't say it.
And I didn't say it either.
Hello,
so-
YouTube. I did not say that. Hello, YouTube comment.
Well done, Tanja. You did well.
I thought it. I'll admit that. But I refrained from saying it.
Yes, your lack of hating on John is admirable.
I tried really hard. Arya even mentions him in the chapter, and I was like, John, and then I decided not to mention it in myself. Not mention it.
How many sets of books have you gone through? If you every time you hear the word John, you throw it into the fire. That must be your the major posts, your like financial sheet every month.
Yeah, most of my.
Oh my god.
funding.
I have 3 rereads, and there's definitely going to be at least 3 John chapters plus 5 honorable mentions.
Yeah, all my money goes into Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we need to make this go on any longer, I guess. Unless you guys want to hear my voice even more, then it's fine. But no, I do need to go to bed at some point. So
You gonna do an outro?
Vikings.
maybe, but I just want to make sure that you guys
Thinking about it.
I'm just gonna make sure that just make sure you're ready before I start after playing, right?
After.
I did not sign up for afterplay.
Very considerate.
To be real, to be moderately serious, it's been very nice to be on a podcast with you guys today, and everyone who's listening, of course. Thank you for keeping up with our antics, and if you want to listen more to us, check out our back catalog at Vassals Kingsgrave. It's in WordPress page. We also hang out on the forums for the podcast advice. Other than that, we also do the Facebook and Instagram and the Twitter sometimes as well. Come hang out with us. We're totally cool. I promise.
Definitely not weird.
Not at all.
So yeah, and of course YouTube listeners, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
But keep in mind that I didn't say anything bad about John today.
Yeah, so thank you guys. And thank you, Tanja, Paul, Zach, Marie, and Alix. Did I forget one?
Casey.
Yeah.
And Casey, yeah.
Didn't do anything. It's okay.
And thank you, me.
Oh my god. Okay, so just for that you don't get thanks for.
Yeah. Bye.
At least he didn't say himself first.
Does anybody have any podcasts that they'd like to promote or anything like that?
Well, there will be the Tartcast, as I've been talking about. It will be edited at some point soon, and it will be out, and then you'll behold the glorious thing that is Tarkarians and me talking about them. But otherwise than that, do you have anything?
What else
Just
is
me.
coming up? There's a Terry Pratchett one coming up, I think. There's a book club one coming up.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to get involved in stuff and wants to join the forums, you can talk with us.
And the new pup, the young pup, sorry.
Oh.
Also, I think they're recording that in a few days.
Also, we should do a Legion cast.
Oh, I haven't watched it. Is it good?
It's fairly okay for a
Fairly okay.
yeah, but for a Marvel show. I mean, it does they do sometimes go over the top, and he definitely does this. It's definitely one of these shows as well, but it's yeah, you should do that.
Oh, and I love that actor, so I'm already convinced. Actually, you don't have to say anything.
Also, Riverdale should be done to a podcast.
Yeah.
Everybody who likes Archie comics, but especially likes how dark and weird it's become in later years, will enjoy the antics that they try to shine through in this series. Riverdale, for people who don't know, is where the Archie comics takes place. So
honestly, I saw commercials for that and thought it was going to be like another One Tree Hill, and then I saw it on the forums and was really confused and had to investigate, and now I understand.
Yeah. Well, as I said, Archie comics have become very weird lately. They've gone a different way than they were to begin with, and that's essentially what they're now trying to capture in a CW show. So
actually, I just made this up on the spot, but I'd really like to do an episode about robotics, whatever, at some point in the foreseeable future. So if anyone wants to talk,
I would do it.
About robots,
I would do it.
Awesome, let's do it right now. Not right now. That's some more sensible thing.
Okay, so this was a long plug. I have to say.
Yeah, you're gonna have to edit through this and pick out everything.
Yeah.
But it's just because VOK is doing so much awesome stuff all the time.
It's just gold everything. Yeah. Okay, well, this is the end of the podcast.
Bye.